Yeah, I grew up in Australia. I left when I was 24, but I think I've still got a lot of Australia in me. And as the term is there, bushfires, um, yeah, they, um, they touch me. They touch my youth and stuff, childhood. So we are talking of which, because one of my earliest memories is a policeman knocking at the door, and the school where my father taught was threatened by fire, and he had to go out and be there. Very early memory. And bringing my father into this, I think my father had a very quiet, modest man. From the outside, he could have easily been seen as very conventional, but he wasn't. And as I've said here, yeah, he's a feminist, and he was anti-racist. You know, in Australia in the 30s of the last century. I mean, you know, that's something. And I think he influenced my values, what in Pellin we call memory links, and where the psychological unconscious is about a number of different things. It's not just about, you know, it's not just about parental or family relations. It's also that concept of memory links. Is also about political and religious and social influences as well. And I think in what I've been presenting here over the last couple of sessions, or maybe it was only one, it feels more, because I've been writing about it, to me it feels more, is what I call the two-strand theories. I think I want to as Nikki and Mary know, I have my shyness and hesitation, and I've got one at the moment, one of those attacks. But I think I wanted to, you know, I'm searching for a name that's more descriptive than two strands. So I think I want to call it two strands in human healing. That's the neck, anyway. And to summarize that and set the theme for today. I talk about the academic and professional strand. My field of work is counseling and psychotherapy. That's sort of our home base. So, you know, in the main, I'm talking about two strands in counseling psychotherapy. There's the official and professional strand, which at times I think we can also call it the official strand. And that is, you know, all of us who've gone through a conventional educational process and got degrees and accreditations and qualifications and licenses and registrations. That's all the professional academic strand. But then there is another strand, which I call the community strand. In some ways it's more diverse, it's a bit harder to group together, but the community strand is, certainly in some parts of America, midwives, natural healers, Alcoholics Anonymous, certainly parts of the women's movement. I don't want to stretch it too far, but I think Black Lives Matter is Mary.
Well, I just wanted to say about that, I don't think this was true in the civil, I don't know, but I didn't get the impression from the women's and gay movements in the 70s that that was true, other than that coming out was healing. But Black Lives Matter and White People for Black Lives, that's an LA-based association I'm involved with, are really focused on the healing strand, because they actually talk about internal
you mean the
work.
Community Strand?
Yes, I'm in the Community Strand.
Yeah.
Because certainly White People for Black Lives is states up front. There's an internalized strand and an internal and external strand within their work. And I've observed something along those lines in Black Lives Matter things I've been to as well. So I think it's a wonderful change. And all the inclusivity, Black people saying we have to include Black trans people or we're not valid. Like, where did that come from? It came from the Black women who started it up, but it's making a very different political healing climate.
And that's, the thing I want to do today is, I guess, define the two strands in human healing, and also, I guess, insist that they have a very, very long history. And in my view, they go back centuries and millennia. Because, as I said last week, it's not always easy to, anyway, for myself, it's not always easy to conceive my head, but we all had ancestors 30,000 years ago. We must have. There's no scientific logic if we don't. So, we have roots going way back. I think a great deal of who we are has roots going back. I go back 30,000 years. That's my sort of cutoff point. Partly because of a certain set of novels I've been into, which I've mentioned other times. They're the novels of Jean Auel, who started with a best-selling novel called Clan of Cave Bear, just to not be mysterious about it. So we're saying there are clearly, in my field of work, there's clearly two strands in social workers and psychotherapists and counselors, qualified one way or the other, working for the state in the main, even though if the funding comes in an indirect way. Essentially, they are the official strand, the academic and professional strand is aligned to those who are in power, whether it's the state or whether it's a religion, whether it's a military group. The official strand is essentially aligned with them. The community strand, what I put forward, has, until very recently, mainly women, has been medicine women, folk healers, not only women, there are some other traditions, but even when you look at those traditions, the men who were healers in, say, indigenous people in America or Canada or Australia, they were part of the officialdom, okay? They were part of the establishment. And I take it sort of all the way back to Egypt, before Egypt, Greece. There were, certainly in terms of physical medicine, there were the men who ruled it, and there were often women who were recognized in the community as being able to heal, being able to provide medicine, being able to get children better, get, aid in a difficult birth. My speculation is that some of the community strand started with midwives, what we would call midwives. The midwives, wise women, healers, medicine women, and they go back with the sort of time frame that, given that it's an intellectual speculation, I'm prepared to take on. So I'm saying they go back forever. And the reason I want to find a way to establish this is, in a sense, quite self-serving, because Pellin doesn't have a lineage. David Pellin came out of nowhere. But he obviously didn't. None of us came out of nowhere. We've all got, I don't know how many times you put the great in, but, we've all got, members of our family going back 30,000 years. Otherwise, we couldn't be here. So I want to sort of establish a sense of belonging, that we are part of a very long tradition. And, David Pellin was a man who, a very, very unusual man. He didn't fit in with any professional structure. He didn't have any professional qualifications or professional recognition. He didn't have any academic qualification. But there have been David Pellins over and over and over again. As I've said before, I feel a moving sort of responsibility that if it wasn't for me, his thought, which I've got a setting sun, I don't know, and a clear sky, not like Northern California and Oregon. Without me, David Pellin's work would have disappeared. And I think there are other people of equal substance, genius, whose work has disappeared, because there's a certain fragility in the community strand. Partly, and as I write about this, and I want to present some of it today, I want to present it without a sort of radical defensiveness. I can be a very clever critic. I mean, I really can. I can be a brilliant critic, said he. And it's not a good part of me. You'll remember the session we had on hard feedback. A man who studied with me once, called Martin Foster, he came to Pellin in a wheelchair. He was from Chicago, and he'd been on a good humor truck, and he wouldn't give some black kids ice cream. So they shot him in the neck. He was paralyzed from the right waist down. So he was a sort of drug addict ski bum. And he didn't prosecute, he wouldn't prosecute. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He came to Pellin in a wheelchair, Pellin, Italy. Not an easy journey. And Martin gave me some hard feedback in one of our hard feedback self-identity sessions when he said, Peter, you've got too much going for you to take so many goddamn cheap shots. And that's all he said. That was a long time ago. That was like more than 4 decades ago, and that still resonates with me. So going into this, I don't want to sort of romanticize the community strand and be cleverly critical of the official strand. And there's the reason I say that, and with the story, is there's a real temptation for me to go there. But as we looked at last week, the official, last Sunday, the official strand contains the people who can get someone on a rehab program who's got 2 counts against them rather than 10 years in prison. And that's a pretty large contribution to be able to do that. And as someone who was at the session on Sunday said, you know, I couldn't do it if I didn't have my PhD. They wouldn't listen to me. So I think as we're proposing this concept of 2 strands, I think we need to be able to see the strength and weakness in both. And the other work that we've been looking at most recently, before we looked at this, was the Pellin concept of authority, which is uniquely as, and it's using the word authority in a completely different way. As I've said before, it's authority in rather than authority over. It's a very unusual and uniquely David Pellin use of the word. And what it means is all our accomplishments, you know, all the things we've worked hard for. In a sense, authority is our work. But it's also how the community we live in and the society we live in recognizes our work, and not go back too much into authority now. But generally speaking, the community strand lacks authority, and that needs to be looked at and addressed. And I think there can be a danger if a particular part of the truth line is the left of center, as ours is, to be a bit righteous, okay? A bit righteous, a little bit self-satisfied at times. I think that's a necessary defense because we don't have the authority, because we often don't have the recognition. Mary?
I was just thinking about Al-Anon and AA's, of course, insistence on anonymity as a principle, and how the community strand can sometimes hold values so important to them that they mitigate against getting more authority. And what I'm thinking of is if you had all the celebrities who were part of AA or NA, Narcotics Anonymous, put on a big show about how incredibly much those programs had helped them, the authority of AA and NA would probably increase because of the power of those people's place in society. Or the doctors, you know, or the other people in the official strand who benefit from those anonymous 12-step programs. But community strand often thinks more about principles and values, I think. Maybe that's a bit overcritical, but that's a good example, I think, of the values being so important that it mitigates against having a more easily accepted place in society.
Yeah, I'd question. I think it's dangerous to say, you know, I take your point, and it's a very, very good one. But I think it's a bit dangerous to say we look at the values and others don't, and that also has, because one of the things I think the community strand will cut corners, let's use a simple phrase, okay, and always have. And they'll break rules and always have. But, you know, as you know, one of the things I draw on all the time, really, and certainly in just my current work about the relationship between politics and therapy, of which the two strands is part, Lord Acton's statement, power tends to corrupt and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. I'm critical of my field of work because they sort of don't think it applies to them. And of course, we have another tragic group of people who did not think it applied to them, and that is some Catholic priests and bishops. You know, I'm a servant of God, so I'm above all that. And, you know, we all know Father John couldn't have done something horrible because he's Father John. We all know Father John. And there, certainly in my field of work, there are, you know, times when confidentiality is not being sufficiently valued, where professionals looking after the needs of their patients and clients rather than their own needs, financially or sexually, and you know what's called boundaries had not been looked after. So I think, in some general sense, we're a bit more chaotic, experimental in the community side. We're a bit more chaotic, experimental, maybe a tad more creative, but at times we can be unthinkingly hurtful, or hurtful in a way that we then find a way to justify. I'm sure that the priests who committed acts that really only can be called evil found a way to justify themselves, as the Germans found a way to justify the Holocaust.
So I'm a bit confused because you said that about the community strand, but I would think that priests belong to the official strand because they have a lot of power.
Oh, exactly. Priests
so
belong
I'm a
to
bit
the...
confused about your
Well,
point
no,
you're making.
I was just going a bit too fast there. No, you can get a lot of corruption in the official strand because they don't take on the responsibility of their power and how they could be corrupted by their power. And by definition, they have a whole bunch of power, okay? Yeah. You know, police chiefs who can bury the evidence, okay? the community strand does not have nearly as much power. But I guess what I want to be careful about is not sort of painting us as angels. I think there are better angels in both strands, not just in ours. And at other times, you know, I've taken a much more radical, much more critical stance than I am now. But I do feel now as I have a responsibility to, you know, put these two things together in a way. I mean, it would be, and you do get it. I mean, you do get in my lifetime, in my career, I have seen a huge change in how the official strand recognizes Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and that's a change. It wasn't there. It wasn't there 40 years ago. It just wasn't. It was slightly dismissed. So I'm struggling here. What I'm struggling to is get them both really, really clear, because the official strand can trace themselves back to Hippocrates and who else. And we say, oh, we have this man, David Pellin, he came out of nowhere, which has been my position for a very, very long time. That's why I came up with this idea. It was a particular demand, as I've said here before, because a colleague of mine was teaching material in community high school in Ann Arbor in Michigan. And the students, they're very bright kids, 15, 16-year-olds. And they were studying this extensively, it wasn't a one-off presentation. It was 3 classes a week for 3 terms. Not only Pellin, but a big hunk of it with Pellin. Colleague of mine called Anne Wright. And she did that for 10 years. She's recently retired, so it's not happening anymore. But the kids wanted to know, okay, where does this fit? Okay, where does this fit? And, they were bright kids. And, they knew there was psychology, and psychology had a history, and there was Freud, and there was Roger. Where does Pellin fit? And that's why I came up with 2 strands, because there have always been things like Pellin. There have always been things like AA. They disappear. They tend, particularly over, of course, AA is, I guess you could say AA is almost crossed over. It's almost the official strand. But it isn't, because you can't make a living. You can't have a career in it, for one of their sort of strokes of genius organizationally. But they certainly don't have a trouble for acceptance as they did once. So in that way, they won a certain battle. And I guess I want to be able to say, yeah, this is in the community strand. We go back a long way.
So Peter, I'm thinking, if you just said, I'm struggling to make this clear, I thought maybe this was a good moment to open it for questions or comments. Well, then we'll know if I get it, but I've heard it. As you said last week, I was the one that came up with the name Community Strand, so I understand what you're talking about. But so anyway, anybody want to unmute themselves and come in with a question or comment?
So the Community Strand, I'm sorry, Cynthia, you go ahead. Or was that Elizabeth?
It was Tamara.
Oh, you can go ahead. I'll go.
Just on The the democratization, it feels like, with podcasts and like with telehealth now, and since COVID, 12 step, that I think that there's been the as a licensed psychotherapist, I have a set fee, and there are people who are offering their life coaching and stuff at a fraction of my fee, and also offering a sense of community. And they can, that the fee is less because their students can come from around the world on Zoom, and it's exciting to watch. There's a hunger for community, and the numbers, the marketing, the affordability, and AA has become international. So you talk about a home group, but there are people from Australia and England and LA and San Francisco. And I just think that there's something about the trust in becoming really vulnerable with without knowing who's in a group very quickly, and that the anonymity is in 12 step. My experience of 12 step has been that the anonymity itself is what gives the organization strength, authority in, not authority over, and that the we and the idea of fellowship, and if that should collapse into ego, where anyone's name or even the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is used to boost the official strand, then the fellowship of AA is ultimately going to collapse and be lost because of the value of the not of recognizing the whole over the cult of the individual. So it just feels like a really different time, and I don't know how better to say that, except that it does feel like the community and the offshoots. I studied somatic psychology and thought, well, shit, I mean, it's just these brilliant people, but their approaches are going to go, with them, and I don't have a way of practicing that holds together. There's no rigorous theoretical framework to hang my work from. So I went into, standard psychotherapy study. But now I find that therapists that have somatic background are much more able to navigate. Even yoga instructors are better able to reach through the screen and touch people. And talk therapy is just a talking head that feels very dried up, and my work feels very dried up for that reason. So this does feel like a destabilizing and ultimately exciting time that also threatens me professionally.
No, I think that's a terrific point, and I think it is. I feel the same thing. I think it's a really exciting time. And I sort of draw a parallel to the availability of live productions of Shakespeare plays. Because, one production is seen all over the world, live, more than maybe more people are going to see Romeo and Juliet on that particular production than
I know the
in
national.
all of history. So
Yeah,
we're
watch
in a new time. We're in a new time.
totally.
Yeah. And I guess, as you know, this is our first part, really. But, I want to do, the opportunities. The word I like to use is, I find the opportunities enchanting, okay? They're just sort of magic. But at the same time, the internet almost has the best and worst of the humankind. Anyway, I think the two, what I'm presenting today about the true strand is, I think and absolutely following up on what you just said, Tamar. The word I was thinking of was belonging. But, a sense of belonging to a very long history, a sense of having a fellowship. Anyway. Others.
Yeah, we had some other people that were wanting to say something. I think Stacey and Cynthia, I believe. Stacey was next, I think.
Yeah, Stacey.
Hi, I'm Stacey, and I just was thinking that the community has always been there, over the fireplace, face to face, and now it's modem to modem, over the phone, over the airwaves. And the community's always been there. It's just lay people and with inner wisdom that they have from life experience. And that's all.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's the sort of central point that I'm wanting to get at in terms of what is social emotional healing. And some of us happens with, those of us who've got, professional titles. But some of us happens over the kitchen. You're right. Some of it happens over the kitchen table. And I think we need to bring those together somewhere. Cynthia.
Well, I find this conversation very interesting because this is a conversation that's been going on in astrological communities for a long time, because at one time astrology was an official strand. Doctors used to be astrologers, but that's been, several centuries ago. So now it's firmly there, but there's some people who want it to get there, but there was a very famous one. I was thinking about the power corrupting. There's a famous, very leading astrologer who did a talk on it, and he said, you know what? Part of the reason astrology is safe is because it's not in the official strand, and talking about things like if it actually, the dangers of actually becoming part of, if it was accepted and was taken seriously, things like insurance companies would try to co-opt astrologers and things like that. And it was like, it was something I hadn't thought about, but I was like, oh yeah, there is a sort of a safety in being in a community strand. You're not, particularly if there's goofiness in the power structure.
Yeah, and I think, yes, anyway, others. Victoria.
Yesterday, I happened to listen to one of the most weird TED Talks from a transgender woman who used to be a man. And the talk was about how she experienced exactly those two strengths as a man and later as a woman. And it was very interesting also to see this gender sort of thing, because male is mostly associated with official strand. And this is how she, when she used to be he, experienced it. And then when he became she became a woman, and how she experiences it from perspective, she was sharing it like it's not often that one person as an experience of both of genders and bringing it together. And what's interesting, Peter, well, when you were mentioning the community strand, the oldest one, it was midwives, wise women. It was all sort of female energy and female witches. It's very interesting that if we look at the word midwife itself, like in French, it's sage-femme, so it's a wise woman. And I know one who is a man. He is a midwife, but as a man. And you cannot call him sage-femme because he is not a woman, but this is one of those things that usually when we look even in the grammar, in the languages that have, you know, like feminine and masculine, for words like boss, director, professor, there is no female equivalent. And all those words are actually part of this authority strand, of this official strand, like professor and whatever. And another thing I wanted to say, that in different mentalities in different countries, because of their history, now when you were just talking about it, I thought, wow, in Austria and in Germany, if you have a professor title or a doctor title, PhD title, it's written in your passport. People put on their doorbells, professor, doctor. And so this is obviously very interesting. And it's also part of this gender thing, how those both strengths are initially, from what you just said, initially formed, if you want. And it looks like, to me, like one has this caring thing, because everything you put under the community or wisdom over the kitchen table while feeding and cooking again, you know, and like even AA. So something that is strong enough, that is not having trouble with accepting itself, because you know you do a real thing. And on the other hand, it's and some who need to say, well, I'm professor, so that is why whatever I'm saying makes sense. So this is very interesting how this, now when I became aware of this while you were talking about it, and it's very true, and how it has this, I don't know if it makes sense what I said, but that's how I experienced your presentation of what you said about it.
No, I think you're right about that, because one of the things is the professional academic strand, or the official strand. I guess the way you get to be the official is to go through the academic and professional qualification. It is tied up with titles, and the way you mention titles is absolutely true in Italy. And I've been running programs there for almost 50 years. And so I've known these people for a very long time. A good friend. And I'm always professore, you know, very frequently.
In Italian, you can say professoressa.
I know you can.
And
well, I wonder when that came in.
In Italy, you can also say it when you are talking or addressing professor's wife.
Okay. Yep. So, you know, we're looking at stuff here that's about status and how status affects how we can help people, and how at times, I guess, the being in the official strand can close down creativity, and at times being in the community strand, people cannot, in Pellin terms, not look after their material life force. Putting that in a more general sense, not look after part of life that's about being organized and being materially secure. Mary.
I've been thinking about what I've seen unfold over my 20 years in California, which is an increase in the people in the community having a way to directly contribute from herd. What I'm talking about is the rise and then struggle with the official strand of alcoholics, people who've, what's the quick way of saying this? People who've been abused alcohol or drugs becoming counselors. And similarly, in the mental health field, the recognition, such as it is, of peer counselors, people who've had diagnoses and have a recovery story, helping other people. And I haven't followed it so closely for the last few years, but what began to happen, I don't know if it overtook the field, was say in both those fields, what began to happen was the people in the official strand start saying, well, they must at least have a BA, and a BA in having a bachelor's degree in America, and probably everywhere now, but in America certainly, is a long and expensive road. So having nurtured this, and same in domestic violence, there were counselors that were reformed perpetrators and things like that, or survivors of abuse. I mean, it was a really wonderful thing. I don't know how widespread it was in America because they only knew California, but it was very heartening. There's people getting some authority, even though they weren't paid the same rates, but getting some authority to contribute directly from their own experience. And as soon as it got a bit of hold, it looked like the official strand came in and said, uh-oh, we better officialize this community strand and take some of its power away. But I think did get somewhat established. So although I haven't looked into it recently, I think the struggle is still ongoing. I don't think those things have disappeared yet. I'm open to correction.
No, I guess
somebody knows more than me.
Going because Pellin in David Pellin on the one hand, and then the Pellin Institute on the other, what I've done with it, and this is my balanced presentation today, guys. But, there is another argument going back but also right now, just how much the official strand will come in and take over. Both Sigmund Freud and Fritz Perls, at the end of their lives, wanted to set up Freud with what do you call the question of the lay analyst, and Perls, who I studied with at the end of his life, wanted to set up a category called Gestaltist. And both of them wanted those people, the lay analyst and the Gestaltist, to be recognized within for Freud in the psychiatric, in the psychoanalytical movement, with Fritz Perls in the Gestalt movement, as equal as practitioners, equal as analysts or Gestalt therapists. They weren't dead 6 months, and those categories were just obliterated, okay, out of the psychoanalytical movement and out of the Gestalt therapy movement. Just taken out. The university just took over. That's simple. And both of them started, using another term, as sort of underground movements. They were not acceptable. No, psychoanalysis was not accepted by the medical profession, and pearls was not accepted by American universities, you know, when he first started out. But they became absorbed into the what I'm now calling the official strand, and they're part of it. So I guess, like I talk about other parts of my work, I like this to be seen as tools, okay? Not somehow or other. I'm calling it the two-strand theory of human healing, but I guess I'd like us to be loose about it. Because I think within it, I think where it can perhaps as a useful tool for some people, it just puts things in a certain perspective. I think for those of us in the, because I'm in both in a way, formally, I guess I'm more in the official strand than the community strand.
Can I come in with something?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about, you know, because I started out in the Pellin Community Strand, when I decided that I needed to develop my authority by going to college and getting a license, I'm quite proud of the way that I just said, I'm going to do this and say all along, I'm someone who was diagnosable and I've got better in the community strand and without taking pharmaceuticals. And I had some rocky times, as some of you already know, because I did that. One of the things I'm particularly proud of is when I was a counsellor at D.D. Hirsch Community Mental Health Centre in what's called a clubhouse, before I started going to college, I ran a peer counselling training group, which I got away with for about 18 months until my supervisor's supervisor said, we have to offer the same services to everyone. You can't handpick some people with care and life force and train them separately. But I did do it for about 18 months. And with those people, we gave a presentation to whoever wanted to come of the whole staff of the Community Mental Health Centre on the pendulum. And the people in this little group of peer counsellors led exercises with the staff on the pendulum, having taught the pendulum to the staff. And then we went off to Antioch University and did a panel on mental health recovery and the pendulum to students in the MA psychology course. As well, and we presented at a conference that's a recovery conference as well. But the big one was, you know, was that I just loved that so much that the staff members were sitting around with their little group led by the people that were in the, you know, the Axis One Diagnosis Community Clubhouse, and I pulled that off. That was a really wonderful thing, I think, and really great for their sense of accomplishment and achievement in life that happened.
Would you like to come in, Joe?
No, thank you. Not just now, Peter, but I'm enjoying listening. Oh, I guess
Okay.
I was thinking about the co-counselling movement.
Yes.
And how important that was actually in this discussion, which happened in England, particularly in London, from about 82 to 87ish, I think.
Yeah. One thing I think we need to do, thanks for bringing that up, Joe. One thing I think we need is accumulate these things, okay? And then claim, hey, you know, this side of things, the community strand, you know, has produced some of the best things in the helping work that's been part of the human endeavor. So we sort of claim it. I think I want it to be a way, and we need the examples, because they tend not to last the way that things that are attached to universities last. Even if the thing attached to the university is not even respected anymore, or not even used anymore, it's still part of the curriculum, okay? And co-counseling had great stuff in it. The other thing that part of the community strand, and I think we need to be careful and protective. We're often quirky, we often make mistakes, and they're often highlighted. Now, there's all sorts of quirkiness and mistakes in the British medical profession or the universities, but they're sort of, well, a little bit, they're swept under the rug. And of course, the classic example of that is sadly the Catholic Church, because there really can't be any debate that this has gone on for centuries. It is only now that investigation and accountability has happened. So I think we need to sort of almost have a pretty recognized history of the community strand, and some really good examples of it. Yeah, Cynthia.
Well, I was just thinking of something listening, and actually my spouse's job is because she has her job. She's runs a drop-in center, but in a community. But the job came about because the state was sued because too many people were in the nursing home and couldn't get out because they didn't have community peer support. So actually, her job. So it's kind of funny because she's like this community strand who's had to be put in place by the official strand because people sued the state for it. So.
Yeah. And, I think, because when I first started using the word transparency in my work and in Pellin, like 50 years ago, it had no cachet, it had no, it a fight you'd even heard. And of course, now it's all over the place. so, we can hope in this hard year that things can get better. And I think things like that are going to happen more and more and more. Careful what you do with your gun, because you might go to prison if you're a cop. They weren't even worried about that 20 years ago. It didn't cross their mind to be worried about it. You can't touch me. I'm a cop in this small town. Now you might be on national television and go to jail. So that's some sort of change. And I guess there's something for me about the combination of politics and therapy that, John Lewis obviously became wonderfully part of the official strand, but the other, particularly the young women who are coming through, Corey Bush, there's a young woman in Ohio called something like D's, T-E-E-S. They're coming from a slightly different place in terms of entering politics. And they're absolutely saying who they are. Now, that's a therapeutic action to say your story, or even, I think, Kamala Harris, or even Barack Obama. Barack Obama, this is not about two strands, it's about relationship therapy and politics, if you just indulge me a minute. You know, before there was any certainty, or before there was any possibility that he'd be president, and before he was really short of being a senator, Barack Obama wrote a book called In Search of My Father. That is a therapeutic process to do that. So there are these sort of changes around, and it's obviously, you know, pushing my own purpose and values. But I think there's more genuine therapeutic process in the community strand, or more opportunity in the community strand for it. And in the academic, professional, official strand, it's almost looked down upon. You know, if you're an ambitious politician and you go to see a therapist and that becomes public and you mail and mainstream, that might be the death knell to your career. I mean, there's something, that's why I want to develop this theme. That's what I'm intrigued by. And I call it ships that pass in the night. Because that's crazy. You could go to jail on a financial charge and relaunch your political career if you are a male politician with a better chance than if you went to a therapist and then wanted to relaunch your and wanted to launch your political career. Crazy. And of course, that's my push about the very, very long history in Pellin of transparency. The relevant
Not in every country.
Yeah, sorry.
Not in every country, though.
Okay, go. Victoria?
Talking about the politicians, that can be, you know, I'm just saying it's half of a joke, as they say.
Yeah.
In every joke, there's a bit of joke. Not in every country, though.
And which side are you coming down on?
There's some politicians that are like kings, and they are immune to anything. So in this,
Right, yes, yes.
this sense, so what you're saying is not for every country, even now in the 21st century.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nikki, do you want to come in on this one at all?
She's not here at the moment.
Oh. Elizabeth
wrote she had to go because the smoke was making her really ill.
Yeah, we live in a tough world, don't we? Don't know where it's going to go. That's where we've got to go. Keep going with a little bit, with the bit we got. Let me just bring it down a little bit. I think the two-strand theory of human healing sounds pretty pretentious, doesn't it? Don't know if that's going to work. I think it could provide a challenge to professional hierarchies. What I would like to do, and I'd like help doing, is bring up, find historic examples so we can absolutely, because, you know, some of my almost an evolutionary study of my field. You know, wanting to go back, you know, where does empathy start? It didn't come out of nowhere. And I've got this very highly developed theory that it started with foster carers. It started with someone who brought up someone else's children. And it's speculative, and it's 30,000 years ago, but my rationale for doing that is that, you know, the great cave paintings of also 20, 30,000 years ago, and the academics who are investigating them, they're speculating too. You know, I've got a lot of experience in therapy and counseling, so I think I've got a place from which I can speculate. I think there's always been incredibly skilled people. I think most of them were women initially, who really sort of solved problems. You know, the official, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, the official medical line was, it was really good to bleed people. And that was sort of accepted. That was, you know, official, that was accepted medical practice. I think it was women healers who questioned it and questioned it and questioned it. And, you know, some of this is out of historical novels. I don't want to deny that, but they're based in, you know, sometimes the nurses were the nuns and the doctors were the priests. So there was that particular imbalance of power. And the doctors on the, you know, the totally professional academic side, you know, all trained at Oxford University, like 15th century, they were just adamant, this is what you do, you bleed. Yeah, Mary.
I'm wondering if you could, I'm just remembering that what we called this one was something, the two strands in relation to the Pellin lift, or as a background to Pellin lift. And just as we're near the end, I just wondered if you wanted to address that briefly.
Yeah, sorry. Well, yes, I think I can. And the words Pellin lift are very new, and I sort of don't use them enough. But the idea of the Pellin lift is the material can be presented in a very straightforward, simple way. And that maybe we'll get back at that more next Sunday. And I think the two-strand theory can be a real lift. I mean, I've done this. I've seen this in America when I've trained first responders and just giving them a sense and having a structure when they can, of course, it's different now because of the press they get. But this was around the drug crisis there. This was in Ohio. And just giving them a sense, you know, the work you are doing is therapeutic. It is really important. And with a Pellin use of transparency, we're not talking down to them from on high. And they know that, okay? So I think it's a lift. And that's where, you know, I want to develop well, first I wanted the title. I mean, I had the idea probably years before I had the title. You know, there are these two strands, and you are in this strand. So you are part of a human healing process that goes back all the way into prehistory. Now, I know, and this, you know, this is cops and paramedics, firemen and women, they know it. I mean, you're not telling me anything new. They're not saying, in my experience, oh, I never saw myself that way. They know what they're doing. They know the therapeutic part of their work. I'm not saying everybody, and these are people who choose to come onto a training course like mine. So, you know, but a whole bunch of them. And, you know, they're accustomed to being looked down upon. As, you know, Mary and Nikki know, I've made a lot out of the statement in fostering. The statement is, you're just the foster carer. And the people who are saying it think they're just saying something that's fair and ordinary, because they're the social workers, magistrates, judges, psychotherapists. Who are saying, you're just foster care. The people receiving it feel completely undervalued. The people who are delivering the message haven't got a clue. And I think that, you know, I don't have the knowledge of first responders that I have of fostering, but I mean, there's something similar there. You're just a cop. And that cop knows she does better psychological intervention than the social worker or the court-appointed psychologist. So I think the lift is being able to make this simple and very significant contribution that I think the lift, I'm not sure about this, but I think the lift can be in claiming these two are of equal importance. There is an equality between them. That'll be hard to get across. But in fostering, I know how to get it across in fostering. I know that. I've done that. I know it can be done.
It's a good time to
Yeah, Joe.
do the closing. Sorry. You've muted yourself, Joe.
Can't hear you.
You're just hitting it too many times. Stop.
You got it.
Okay. I said I'll be quick, Mary.
Oh no, it's fine. I wasn't trying to hurry you. I didn't see your hand was up, that's all.
I was just thinking about what you've been saying and thinking, is the essence of it, Peter, that we've got these two strands, we're in this dialectic, and the issue is how can better synthesis be facilitated, given that both parties are protective of their authority and the academic and official side has got all sorts of machinery in place to make sure its authority is well overvalued, really, by comparison to, I would say, our side.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something like that. And that's where I want to try and drop just my critical stance, because I know that gets in the way. That's why I'm a critic of my critic. And I think in terms of Pellin, we've sort of got it right in our material. It's passive listening to feedback. There's the official strand, passive listening to the other one. And I think something about curiosity. I mean, I know. Yeah, at one time, it's funny, I haven't even had this thought for you. But at one time it was a very, very big, I guess, part of the energy where it's coming from. Why am I the only person who's looking? Why am I the only person who's really seriously looking at how the hell does this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous work, because it was obvious it worked. It helped people. Social workers, faculties of social work, faculties of psychology, psychotherapy, they weren't even curious. Now that's not true anymore, you know. And I used to talk about it. I used to say, this is a scandal. This thing works and nobody's investigating it but me, and I'm nobody. That changed. Anyway, well, do you want to say anything, Nikki?
No, because I just disappeared and came back again, I'm afraid, again.
Okay. So we'll end there with our usual ending. Yeah, I'm Peter, and I'm in Norfolk, in England. And I guess I want to keep struggling with this. I really do. It's a struggle. Yeah, and I guess just to say it, I guess the two-strand theory is a voice against sort of cynicism and resignation. Well, they've got all the power and they're always going to have all the power. What are you going on about? No, AA works. You know, these other things work. Anyway, that's me. Do you want to go next, Mary?
Sure, I'm Mary. I'm in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, and I think that is a very important discussion, and I'm glad that we've brought it up. And I feel like I've always felt my heart was in the community strand, and we didn't really have a way of talking about it. So I think it's a very valuable discussion, and great to gain the history and linking up the speculative history that really works for me.
Joe?
I'm Jo. I'm in Yorkshire, England. I've got nothing to add at the moment, thanks. But I've really enjoyed this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Ma?
Oh, I'm Tamara, San Francisco, and I really appreciated the clarification of thinking along these lines, these strands, and I have nothing to add.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Nikki, just finishing up.
Sorry, I just muted myself. I thought I was unmuted. I thought it was, anyway, the other way around. I'm Nikki. I'm still in Wimbledon, London. Thank you.
Okay. Stacey?
Thanks, Stacey. I'm in Nevada. I enjoyed today.
Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and I really enjoyed this discussion, and it's been very helpful thinking through other things too. So thank you.
Okay, Victoria?
I'm Victoria. I'm in Paris, and I wouldn't mind having a bit of more of official strand in my life.
I couldn't hear the last bit.
I said I wouldn't mind being part of official strand at this point in my life.
Okay. Good ending. Okay, well, thank you all very much. And I hope to see you on Sunday. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.